By the time Margaret felt the bone in her fingers start to burn, the music was already swallowing her scream. The club lights were cutting through the darkness, blue, purple, red, fighting with the thick smell of sweat, perfume, and expensive drinks. Naira notes floated through the air like green and white butterflies, raining down from the raised hands of happy men, laughter, shouts, phones in the air, flash after flash. And there, on the shiny floor, Margaret's right hand was stretched out, fingers curled around 3 crumpled notes, trapped under a boot the size of a small bucket. The bouncer's boot. He stood over her, tall like a wall, his face blank and cold above her, his black shirt tight around his broad chest, the heel of his boot pressed harder into her fingers. Margaret's eyes watered. She tried to pull her hand back, but the sole pinned her to the ground. She tried to shout. Nobody heard. The DJ screamed into the mic, the crowd roared. The music jumped, Margaret's mouth opened and closed, but her voice disappeared into the noise like a drop of water in the ocean. For almost 5 full minutes, she stayed like that, half kneeling, half lying on the floor, her wig slightly shifted, her palm burning under his weight. She used her free hand to hit his leg, but he didn't move. He didn't even look down. To the men spraying money, she was invisible. To the bouncer, she was a problem. To Margaret, this was the moment she understood that money could lift you up and also crush you. But before that night, before the pain and the boot and the silent scream, Margaret was just a girl carrying a black nylon bag and a head full of worry, standing at the edge of Lagos. Margaret arrived in Lagos on a hot Monday afternoon, the kind of afternoon where the sun sits heavy in the sky like it's angry. She stepped down from the bus at the park with 1 small box, 1 nylon bag, and 5,000 naira folded into the inside of her bra. She wore a faded yellow dress and rubber slippers. Her hair was tied with a simple scarf. Sweat had drawn thin lines on her forehead. Lagos didn't care. Cars shouted with their horns, conductors argued, street hawkers stretched their hands into traffic with pure determination. Billboard faces smiled down at her with perfect teeth and phones in their hands. Margaret stared up at them for a moment. They looked like they lived on the other side of life. She took a deep breath and adjusted her scarf. "I didn't come here to fear," she whispered to herself, "I came here to make money." It was not just a dream. It was a deadline. Her mother's last words before she left the village still rang in her ears. "Margaret, your younger brother's school fees are waiting. Your father's medicine is waiting. Even this roof over our head is waiting. If Lagos will not help us, then nothing will." Margaret had nodded, wiping her mother's tears with the edge of her wrapper. She promised she would not waste the opportunity. She promised she would not come back empty-handed. She believed Lagos would give her something. She just didn't know Lagos would give it to her on the floor of a nightclub. The first week in Lagos was full of, "We will get back to you." Margaret tried everything. She walked into restaurants, they shook their heads. She tried small boutiques, they said they had enough girls. She tried supermarkets. They told her she needed experience. Experience from where? She asked quietly as she walked back to her cousin's 1-room apartment one evening, dust on her slippers and emptiness in her stomach. Her cousin Beezy worked in a small office. She was kind, but she was tired. Lagos had drained some of the softness from her eyes. That night, as they ate Gary and groundnut, Beezy looked at her carefully. "Margaret," she said, "how much do you have left?" Margaret looked at the small purse beside her and swallowed. "Less than 2,000. Beezy sighed. "This Lagos is not for soft hearts. Do you want to hear something different?" Margaret looked up. "Different how?" Beezy lowered her voice, though there was no one else in the room. "Money picking." Margaret blinked. "What is that?" Beezy said the word slowly, "Professional money picking, in the club." The first time Margaret followed Beezy to a nightclub, it felt like crossing into another world. The building was wrapped in glass and light, with a long line of cars outside, big cars with tinted windows and shining rims. Men in fine shirts and gold chains laughed loudly as they came down. Women in tight dresses and high heels walked past like they were floating. Margaret adjusted her simple dress and tried not to stare. Beezy wore a red dress that grabbed her waist and ended just above her knee. Her wig was long and smooth, her face was carefully painted, she smelled like something sweet and expensive. "Margaret, stop looking like you are in shock," Beezy whispered, squeezing her hand. "You are not a villager here, you are a money picker, walk like you belong." "How can I belong?" Margaret whispered back, "Look at my shoe, look at my hair." "We will fix that later," Beezy said. "For now, just watch and learn, don't talk too much. Don't fight. Bend, pick, and move." Inside, the club swallowed them. Lights. Smoke. Music. Bodies. The air was hot and heavy. People pressed close to each other, laughing, dancing, recording videos. The speakers pushed out sound hard enough to shake Margaret's chest. She watched as a man with a fat stomach and a loud laugh began to spray money on a woman dancing in front of him. Notes flew past her shoulders and fell to the floor. That was when Margaret saw them. 3 girls, all dressed well, moving like shadows near the dancing crowd. They bent quickly, hands like magnets, scooping the fallen notes into small bags hidden behind their backs. Not fighting, not shouting, just smooth motions, like they had practiced 1,000 times. Beezy nudged her, "You see them? Those are money pickers. Girls like you, girls like me." Margaret stared, her heart began to beat faster. "How much," she whispered, "can somebody make in one night?" Beezy smiled with only one side of her mouth. "It depends on the night, and on your eyes, and on your courage. Some nights, nothing, some nights, you go home shaking." Margaret looked again at the girls, their nails shone, their wigs bounced. Their shoes were clean, they didn't look like beggars, they looked like they belonged. "Just don't look desperate," Beezy warned. "If you look like you are here to pick crumbs, they will chase you. You must look like you came to chill but you don't like waste." It sounded simple, but the first time Margaret tried it, it wasn't simple at all. The first club she went to alone, she was not popping. She was just Margaret, in a borrowed dress and cheap sandals. The bouncers saw her before the money did. She tried to smile as she walked past them, clutching her small black bag. One of them, a tall man with a thick neck, blocked her way. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Inside now," she said, trying to sound relaxed. He looked her up and down, from her rough wig to her dry slippers. He scoffed, "Who you follow come?" Margaret's throat dried. She lied quickly, "My friend is inside," she say. "Which friend?" he cut in. He didn't give her time to answer. "Go outside, you are not entering this place." Before she could protest, he grabbed her by the elbow and turned her around. The move was clean, practiced. Margaret found herself back on the pavement, her face hot with shame. It happened again, and again. Different clubs, same story. They dragged her out by her arm. They blocked her at the door. Once, 2 bouncers pushed her so hard that she landed on the ground in front of a group of laughing girls. That night, she walked home with tears in her eyes and dust on her knees. In Lagos, she thought, even to pick money, you must first look like money. The decision came the next morning, as she sat in front of a small mirror, staring at her tired face. Margaret looked at her reflection and spoke to herself. "If they are looking at your outside," she said, "then change your outside." She counted her money, it was not much, but it was something. She took almost all of it and went to the market. She bought a new wig, nothing too expensive, but straight and neat. She bought a simple, well-fitted dress that hugged her body in a way that made her stand taller. She bought shoes with a small heel, stable enough to run in but pretty enough to shine under club lights. She bought a small bottle of perfume that smelled like vanilla and orange. She bought a cream that promised to make her skin glow. She didn't see it as vanity. She saw it as investment. I am rebranding, she told Beezy with a shaky laugh that evening. I cannot look like I came to beg. Beezy nodded, that is how to start. In this Lagos, packaging is currency. That night, Margaret got dressed slowly. She slid into the new dress, smoothed the fabric over her hips, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her shoulders were straighter. Her neck looked longer. Her legs looked firmer in the small heels. She brushed the new wig until it fell softly around her face. She dabbed the perfume on her wrists and behind her ears. She rubbed the cream into her skin until it shone. When she walked out into the street, even the air seemed to look at her differently. At the club door, the same type of bouncer looked up as she approached. His eyes moved from the wig to the dress to the shoes. He stepped aside without a word. Margaret walked in. The lights hit her skin, the music wrapped around her, heads turned, not in mockery, but in curiosity. And when the first bundle of money flew up and fell like rain, Margaret was ready. She moved carefully, not too close to the men spraying, not too far away from the falling notes. She danced a little, smiled lightly, and when the notes touched the floor, her eyes sharpened. She bent, fast but smooth, hand brushing the floor, scooping notes and slipping them into her bag with the speed of someone who had counted every grain of Gary in a cup. By the time the night ended, her feet ached and her back was stiff, but there was a soft, heavy weight in her bag. When she reached home and poured it all onto the floor, she stared at it for a long time. Money. Her money. She cried that night, a strange mix of joy and fear and something she could not name. From that night, Margaret was no longer just a girl in Lagos. She was a professional money picker. For the next 2 years, the club became her office. Some weeks, she worked 4 nights. Some weeks, she worked every single night, moving from club to club like a shadow in high heels. She knew which nights rich men preferred. She knew which artists pulled crowd. She knew which tables to stand near when the champagne came out. She learned to read body language, the man who liked to spray to show off, the one who sprayed only when his friends watched, the one who sprayed when the DJ called his name. She also learned danger. Men who wanted to touch what they had sprayed. Hands that tried to slip lower on her back. Eyes that felt heavy and hungry. Not all the money on the floor was free. Sometimes, she went home with plenty. Sometimes, she went home with almost nothing. But it was always more than what she could have made washing plates in a restaurant. She started sending money home. Her younger brother, Chinedu, returned to school. Her father's medicine was bought on time. Her mother replaced the broken zinc sheet on their roof. On the phone, Margaret always said the same thing. I'm working in events, mama, people throw money away in Lagos. I'm just picking my own blessing. Her mother would laugh and say, as long as God is with you, my daughter. Don't forget to pray. Margaret prayed, every night before she left the house, she knelt beside her bed and prayed. But she did not always feel like God was standing at the club door with her. Because at the club door, there were other gods. The bouncers. In every club, bouncers stood like black pillars guarding the door, the VIP sections, the stage. Some of them liked her. Some of them tolerated her, some of them hated her for reasons she never understood. But one night, Margaret met the bouncer who would almost break her hand and something inside her. His name was Bruno. That was the name she heard other people call him. Bruno was huge. His shoulders were as wide as a small gate. His arms were thick. He had a full beard and small, sharp eyes. The first time Margaret saw him, she felt his gaze before she felt his presence. She was in the middle of the club, bending to pick notes as a popular artist performed. The crowd was wild, money fell in waves, Margaret moved like water. Then she felt it a weight at the back of her neck, like eyes pressing into her. She straightened and turned slightly. Bruno stood at the edge of the crowd, arms folded, facing her direction. He wasn't looking at the artist, he was looking at her. Margaret's stomach tightened. She looked away and kept working, but she could feel his gaze following her. Later that night, as she tried to move closer to the VIP section when another man started spraying, she felt a hand clamp onto her arm. She turned, it was Bruno. "This side is for customers," he said, his voice low but full of warning. "I'm not disturbing anybody," Margaret said softly. "I'm just dancing." Bruno's eyes dropped to her bag briefly, his lip curled, "Go back." It didn't feel like a simple instruction. It felt like a push back into a corner she couldn't see. From that night, Bruno watched her. She noticed him in the mirrors, in the corners, near the stage. If she tried to move into a hot area, he would appear. Sometimes he said nothing, just stared until she moved. Sometimes he made small comments. "Money no day finish for floor? You no day rest? Na only you sabi pick? You no fit leave something for others?" Margaret swallowed her anger and smiled politely. "I'm just doing my work, sir." But inside, fear began to grow like a cold seed. Still, she couldn't stop. There was rent to pay, there were school fees, there were people at home who didn't know her fingers ached from picking up what others left behind. One night, everything changed. It was a Friday night, the kind of night when Lagos refused to sleep. The club was extra full, a big man was celebrating his birthday. There were balloons at the entrance and a red carpet leading in. Margaret had heard from other girls that this man liked to spray enough money to cover the floor. She dressed carefully, new nails, clean hair. Soft, glowing skin. She wore a short black dress that hugged her body and silver heels that caught the light. In the mirror, she looked like a girl who had no problems. Inside, she felt like a girl who had only one problem: if she didn't make money tonight, next month's rent would swallow her whole. The music was already loud when she arrived, thick smoke hung over the dance floor, tables were full, bottles clinked, laughter rolled like thunder. Margaret positioned herself near the side of the dance floor, close enough to move in, far enough to pretend she just came to enjoy herself. When the birthday man arrived, the DJ screamed his name, the crowd shouted, cameras flashed. Then it happened. Bundles of money flew into the air, sprayed from both hands as he danced. The notes went up and then fell like rain, showering the people around him, bouncing off shoulders, sliding down legs, dusting the ground. Margaret's eyes sharpened. She moved in with the other girls, dancing, smiling, bending slightly as if tying her shoe, fingers sweeping the floor, notes disappearing into her bag. For a brief moment, she forgot Bruno existed. She saw only the floor and the money. Near the front, a big spray hit the air, heavier than the others, and a thick cloud of notes burst forth. People laughed and jumped. Margaret saw an opening on the floor, a small space near the man's feet where plenty notes fell at once. Her mind did a fast calculation. If I dive now, just once, I can grab enough to settle the rent. She took a breath and moved. She dove forward, down, her palm sliding across the cool floor, fingers closing around a handful of notes. And then, weight. A crushing, heavy, sudden weight, pressing her hand flat to the floor, grinding her fingers into the ground. Margaret gasped, her body jerking from the shock. Pain shot up from her fingers to her elbow. She looked up, Bruno. He was standing right over her, his boot planted firmly on her hand. His face was empty, eyes flat, as if he was looking past her. His weight did not shift, he did not pretend it was an accident, he just stood there. Margaret's heart slammed against her ribs. She tried to pull her hand, but the boot didn't move. It was like someone had dropped a rock on her bones. "You are on my hand," she tried to shout, but the music stole the words. The DJ screamed something into the mic, the crowd roared, voices rose around her, laughter, shouting, the money kept falling. Margaret felt panic grow inside her like a wave. She hit his leg with her free hand, once, twice, 10 times, her nails scratched his trousers. He didn't move. The pain grew hot and sharp. Her fingers started to feel like they were no longer part of her body. Her eyes filled with tears. Nobody looked down. They were all looking at the man spraying money, at the phone lights, at the sparkle of bottles. For almost 5 minutes, Margaret stayed there half kneeling, half lying, trapped, invisible. At some point, the spraying ended. The man laughed and walked away with his friends, stepping past Margaret as if she was just part of the floor. Only then did Bruno step back. The sudden freedom made her hand scream louder than the weight had. She snatched it to her chest, cradling it close. Her fingers were red, the skin around her knuckles almost purple. Margaret looked up at him, anger and humiliation burning her throat. "Why?" she mouthed. Bruno looked at her for a brief second, his eyes cold, and then he turned away, already scanning the room for someone else to control. Margaret stayed on the floor for a while, her whole body trembling. She wanted to shout, she wanted to throw the money in his face, she wanted to stand up and never come back. Instead, she wrapped her injured hand in the small scarf from her bag, held it close to her chest, and went home early. That night, she didn't count money. She counted the slow throbs of pain. The next morning, her hand was swollen. Her fingers looked like small sausages, she could barely close them, every touch hurt. Beezy hissed when she saw it, "Ha! Margaret! What happened?" Margaret told her everything, her voice low and shaking about the spray, the dive, the boot, the pain, the empty eyes of Bruno as he stood on her hand like she was dirt. Beezy sat back, her face tight with anger. "I have heard of that man," she said. "He thinks he owns the whole club. Why didn't you shout? Who would hear me?" Margaret asked quietly, everybody was looking at the money. "Will you go back there?" Beezy asked. Margaret stared at her hand. She thought of the rent. The school fees. Her mother's soft voice on the phone. The small box of food in the kitchen. The money she had sent last week that was already finished. "Yes," she said finally. "I will go back. But not tonight." She took 2 nights off, wrapping her hand with hot cloth, rubbing it with balm, praying softly over it. The pain eased slowly, the swelling went down, her fingers remained stiff, but they could move. On the 3rd night, she got dressed again. Her hand still hurt, but her heart hurt more. Fear had moved in quietly. Every time she thought of stepping into the club, she remembered the weight of the boot, the emptiness in his eyes. But Lagos did not accept fear as payment. Bills did not respect bruises. So Margaret went back. She avoided Bruno's club for a while. She moved to other places, followed whispers of big events, weddings, and birthday parties. People still sprayed money. She still picked. But something in her had changed. She began to watch more than she bent. She studied more faces: bouncers, managers, rich men, rich women. She noticed the way some of them looked at the money pickers, like they were mosquitoes. Money fell like rain, but not every drop was meant for her. It was easy to forget that when her bag grew heavy and her account balance rose. It was hard to remember it when the landlord smiled at her because she paid on time. Still, in quiet moments, the picture of her fingers under Bruno's boot came back to her, as clear as the night it happened. One evening, months later, Margaret found herself back at the same club. Not by choice, by necessity. Rent again, fees again, medicine again, life in Lagos was a hungry mouth that never stopped asking. The club had changed a little, new lights, new posters on the wall, but the smell was the same. The noise was the same. As she walked in, her chest tightened. Bruno was at the door. He scanned the people coming in, his face as blank as ever, but when his eyes touched Margaret, something flickered: recognition. Maybe surprise, maybe irritation. Margaret's steps faltered for half a second, then she raised her chin and kept walking. He did not stop her. Inside, the club hummed with energy. A famous artist was performing that night. Money pickers already hovered like soft shadows at the edges of the crowd. Margaret found a place near a pillar, one hand resting on the cool surface, the other clutching her bag. Why did I come back? She asked herself. But she already knew the answer. She had no other job, no certificate, no rich uncle, just a talent for moving through a crowd and seeing opportunities on the floor. She closed her eyes for a moment and whispered, "God, please protect me." When she opened them, something unexpected happened. A woman she had never seen before was standing beside her. She was in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, with bright eyes and a calm smile. She wore a simple but expensive-looking dress, and her hair was tied back neatly. She had the air of someone who was used to giving instructions. "Your name is Margaret, right?" the woman said, leaning close to be heard above the music. Margaret stiffened. "Yes, Ma, do I know you?" The woman smiled lightly. "You don't know me, but I know you. I've watched you here before. You are efficient." Margaret didn't know whether to be flattered or scared. "My name is Lara," the woman said. "I organize events for some of the big men who come here. Let me give you one free advice." Margaret swallowed. "I'm listening." Lara's eyes flicked quickly around the club, then back to Margaret. "Not all money on this floor is just money," she said slowly. "Some of it is bait, some of it carries stories you don't want to be part of. If you are not careful, one day you will pick something that looks like ordinary cash and find out it was a trap." Margaret frowned. "A trap how?" Lara gave a small, sad smile. "You are still young, just remember what I said. There is a reason some people here don't like you girls. They are not only angry because you are picking. They are afraid you may one day pick the wrong thing." With that, she patted Margaret's arm and moved away, disappearing into the crowd like smoke. Margaret stood there, confused, slightly shaken. She wanted to go after the woman and ask, "What do you mean? What wrong thing?" But at that moment, the DJ shouted, and the crowd roared, and a fresh wave of money shot into the air. Her body moved before her mind. She stepped forward. That night, Margaret made more money than she had in months. The birthday man sprayed without mercy. Notes covered the floor. Margaret's bag grew heavier and heavier. Her injured hand throbbed, but her heart leapt as she watched the pile in her mind. By the time she left the club, the sky was already turning pale at the edges, hinting at dawn. She stepped out into the cool air, tired but satisfied. Bruno stood near the exit, talking to another bouncer. As Margaret walked past, his eyes slid briefly over her bag, then over her face. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other. His gaze was unreadable, not angry, not friendly, just watching. Margaret looked away and kept walking. Outside, she hailed a tricycle and rode home, hugging her bag tightly on her lap. The streets were quieter now. Lagos was resting, just for a short time, before waking up to chase money again. In her small room, she locked the door, poured the money on the bed, and smiled with relief. The notes formed a small mountain. Her mind began to calculate rent, food, medicine, small savings. For the first time in a long time, hope felt like something she could touch. Then her phone vibrated. An unknown number. Margaret picked it up carefully. "Hello?" There was no answer at first. Just a soft crackling. "Hello?" she said again, a little louder. This time, a low male voice came through, rough and calm. "Margaret." She froze. "Who is this?" "Don't ask me who I am," the voice said, "just listen. If you value your life, don't go back to that club tonight." Her heart stumbled. "Who are you?" she repeated, her voice shaking now. "What are you talking about?" "They are watching you," the voice said. "You picked something you were not meant to pick. Tonight, they plan to collect it back, with interest. The line went dead. Margaret stared at the phone, her hand trembling. She turned slowly to look at the pile of money on her bed, notes spread out like a river of green and white. Somewhere inside that pile, there was something she had picked by mistake. Something somebody wanted badly. The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were creeping in. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights slipping through the thin curtain for a brief second. The light touched Margaret's face, then vanished. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a message from an unknown number. She opened it with shaking fingers. A single photo stared back at her. It was a picture of her inside the club from that same night, Margaret in her black dress, bent low, hands stretched out, scooping money from the floor. In the corner of the image, almost hidden behind the blur of moving legs, Margaret saw something she hadn't noticed before. Not a note. Not a coin. Something small and dark, lying on the floor beside the money, just where her hand had been. Below the photo, there were only 4 words. "We need to talk. Tomorrow." No name, no address, no explanation. Just another message underneath it, arriving a second later from the same unknown number. "If you don't come, they will come to you." Margaret's phone slipped slightly in her sweaty hand. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a rooster crowed weakly, welcoming the morning. In her little room, with her swollen fingers still aching from old pain and her bed covered with new money, Margaret stood frozen between 2 fears, the fear of going back to the club, and the fear of what would happen if she didn't. She looked at the door, at the window, then back at the money. For the first time since she came to Lagos, Margaret wished she had never learned how to bend and pick. She wished she could be just a girl, not a professional money picker with a stranger watching her every move. Her phone lit up again, this time, a final message. "Come alone and don't tell anyone, midnight." Margaret slowly sank onto the edge of the bed, her heart pounding in her ears. Midnight. The same hour when the club would be alive again. She stared at the clock on the wall. She had less than 18 hours to decide whether to obey the message, or to run from it. But running where? To whom? As the first light of dawn crept into the room, turning the edges of the money pile pale, Margaret pressed her injured hand to her chest and closed her eyes. She didn't know that, somewhere across town, Bruno was also staring at a photo on his phone. And she didn't know that the thing she had picked that night was not just a mistake. It was a secret. A secret that belonged to someone who would do anything to keep it buried. Anything. Even if it meant stepping on more than just her hand. Margaret thought she was just picking money. But that night in Lagos, she picked a secret. And secrets, in this city, are more expensive than cash. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling tales. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, we love hearing from you. And stay tuned for the next chapter of our incredible story.